is being chewed into. And so this morning, I am delighted to have the Managing Director of Eldoret Water and Sanitation Company, that is Peter Biwott, as well as Daniel Wanjoki, who is the CEO of Ecosave Africa, as we get into this very, very important conversation. It is about climate action, most importantly, climate change affecting water supply. Daniel, I see you have carried some water for us here and it's a bit of products from Ecosave. I perhaps want to understand whether then this would be the ultimate solution to the troubles that bedevil us as pertaining to the question of water. That we have a lot of water, yet we have areas that are extremely dry. If you look at the picture behind you, you realize that it paints a very interesting scenario where there's one side where it's all green and there's another side that is all dry. On layman's language, what really informs this? Because as a country, as the global fraternity, this is where we are. As you introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for hosting me. As Eldoret Water and Sanitation Company, of course, maybe to say that I'm currently the MD of Eldoret Water and Sanitation Company. It's a water service provider in Eldoret for Eldoret municipality. And we are the second largest water service provider in Kenya. So currently, there are issues of course, climate change. You can see even globally what is happening in countries. There's a lot of drought, widespread, even in Europe, in the Americas, and also here in Africa. The rain patterns actually have changed. And even as, for example, in Eldoret, we are facing the same challenge because what happened in the recent past is that the rain's delayed. I know right now as we speak there's a lot of rain, and that all is because of one degradation of our catchment area and also the way the world is changing. And that poses a serious threat to our urban cities where we face scarcity of water. Even as we speak in Eldoret, we don't have enough water for our hometown. So issues of climate are becoming increasingly very important. And these are things that we need to have conversations on how we can be able to address them. And also on the side of wastewater. Right now in Eldoret, we are expanding our sewer line. We have 2 wastewater treatment plants. There's a lot of water which goes through the systems. And I think we are looking ahead here to see how can we get investments to recycle the same water and bring it back. Because already we have a deficit of almost 20 million liters of water per day in our hometown. And that is a situation across all towns in Kenya, including Nairobi. And true to it, one could pride on the fact that you could be amongst, the second best in terms of making sure that there's water for the people. But this can only be celebrated until we get to that level where we realize that indeed, because of the climatic conditions and the changes, we no longer have water to supply. And when we're talking about recycling of water, I think then he comes in best and perhaps to explain just what is recycling of water it is. Is there water that is available actually even for recycling at the space that we are in? And I think we take a clear example as to what is right behind you, that one place is extremely dry, the other side is all green and everything. But as time goes by, you realize that the dry aspect eats into the fleshy aspect, and we ask ourselves, what is this that we're not doing right?
Thank you. It is true that the water he gets is 20 million liters. Maybe the deficit is talking about actually available in his system, but not in the condition that is right for him to use. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Daniel Wanjoki, CEO of Ecosave Africa, and an environmentalist, and also I play a role in the making of standards for water, sanitation, and water reuse. And so when I talk about the possibility of recycling, I'm actually informed by the many documents that we've gone through trying to make water recycling the next avenue for actually sustaining sustainability. Because an example of Eldoret, they receive, let's say, 20 cubic million liters a day.
It is for 3 million liters of water per day.
3 million liters a day.
Okay.
Yeah. But at midnight, that is now classified as waste.
Okay.
And he has to get more fresh water from the whatever to get another 43 million cubic. It therefore means 43 million liters. What that means is that he has to continuously extract from the environment, from the river Sosiani or whichever river that he's getting the water from, to sustain. Yet, in Eldoret, there are few industries that could actually do with recycled wastewater. So their demand, daily demand, which could be in the region of actually 10 million liters, can actually be met by doing a recycling system that classifies their water into just what they need. If it's a paper industry, pulp industry, if it's a leather industry, if it's textile industry, they can just get the quality of water they require from the recycled wastewater.
When you say the quality of water, and I think that is in most cases the biggest of questions and fears, that just how safe is recycled water, in as much as we know very well that then water can be used, water is used, you know, for very many duties. The question then would be how, and how safe?
When you say the character of water or the quality of water you are actually recommending for recycling, it means that water should not have heavy metals, they should not have too much biological loading in terms of it should not be likely to cause diseases. For example, in his area, the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital wastewater treatment system should not join his clean water or sewerage system. It should be isolated from the water that can actually be recycled, because we assume that in a hospital setup there could be likelihood of high biological loading, contamination, and so that water should be taken out of the budget for recycling.
Recycling, okay.
The other aspect is what chemicals are you using to actually discharge into our toilets and our sewerage system. We should avoid doing chemicals that are harmful to the environment or to that fish and aquatic life by eliminating some sources of waste from some industries. Like if you had a tannery in Eldoret, their water should never go into the sewerage, because normally tannery water will have chromium, which is a heavy metal, and that's where we are saying we need to know what it comes into his system.
Okay.
By knowing what quality of water is getting into his system, he is now able to recommend that water for reuse by Rivertex. Or that is Rivertex, for example, who would use a lot of water for cleaning lint, and and it's a safe process, even if it's slightly biologically contaminated, because they would be able to guarantee in their own system that that water is not getting to be used by humans. Okay.
And before we get into the intrigues of that, perhaps, Peter, just to get to understand, and you speak high on the question of, you know, recycling, that is an acknowledgement that really we do not have enough water, and therefore the little that is there, as we put it to use, we need to find mechanisms of making sure that we also preserve these for other use. Just how then is the climate coming in and the changes that we witness today to impact on our water, to impact on access to water?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, the quality of water also can be achieved if our forest cover is intact. Like, for example, we've realized that in our catchment area, there's been a lot of economic activities where other Kenyans actually harvest the forest for economic purposes. And as a result of that, you know, the water sources quality becomes compromised. You'll find that there's a lot of iron, there's a lot of manganese, because of also construction works. You know, we have a devolved system of government, and right now there's a lot of construction of roads, construction of, you know, parks. So that compromises the quality of water, and that's why we're saying that we need to restore our water catchment areas. Our water catchment areas as Eldoret is about 177,000 hectares, of which inside there's about 85,000 hectares of land which is protected forest. Now, when we preserve these catchment areas and we put indigenous trees, what we have done this year, we have planted actually about 125,000 tree seedlings. Then we are helping to improve the quality of water, you know, and this is what we are trying to do, so that we first of all ensure that we increase the quantity, and then we increase the quality, Currently, we've partnered actually with the Nature Conservancy to set up the Eldoret Retain Water Fund, which is going to help us to conserve that old catchment area. In most urban centers today, many consumers are complaining of the quality of water, because if the iron load is high in the water that we treat, then it makes treatment very expensive.
Right.
We might not be able to reduce the levels of those impurities in water, and many people complain. I've just been looking across the world, and I saw there's been that challenge in Mexico, and I saw there was a challenge like that in the state of California in the US. So it's a real issue that I think as a country we need to start running the talk here, maybe divert a lot of our resources in other areas towards water towers conservation. So basically, when we have enough trees, then we will be able to have good quality of water, and enough water for that matter. I know many in our country we've been largely focusing on building dams, but I think the paradigm is shifting, and in fact even the World Bank currently is supporting projects in catchment conservation, because you might build dams, but at the end of the day, if your water catchment area is degraded, you'll not have enough water to supply, and that is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now as a country.
Okay, and we recently witnessed what played out in Cape Town. That was quite worrying. Still yet to establish whether South Africa then came in handy very quick to address the matter. But when we're talking about, just having enough water coverage, enough of the trees, I think that automatically relates to what we do, climatically, not just in the country, but globally. And they say sometimes in 2001 to around 2017, around 74% of natural disasters were water related. And therefore we ask ourselves, can we reverse this? At what point did we get to this level in the first place? How hard were we on the economy, on the environment, for us to have gotten to that level? And when we have gotten to this very level, do you suppose there are mechanisms that can be brought on board for us to make a reverse? And how long would it take us?
Thank you. It is true that humanity has not been very kind to nature. We have been overexploited when we want to extract resources, we have overdone it. One thing is when we allowed global warming or climate change to go unfettered or completely, because we didn't take it seriously until 2015, when people started saying the likelihood that we are not going to have rainfall like we used to get. It's when people started taking this issue seriously. And even when we did those conferences and we had Paris 1 and Paris 2, there is not much that was done on the ground. But we talked a lot of how to stop the global warming from 1.5 to 3 degrees. But it has already happened. We didn't stop the global warming trend, but we have actually talked a lot about doing it. The one thing that we failed in doing is in planting trees. We should have started planting trees as far back as 1980. That's when actually we started losing our global trend in weather. We stopped getting the occasional rainfall that used to come as predictably as tomorrow comes. Today we don't know when the rains are going to come. I've heard them talking that, saying that we have had delayed rains. We didn't have delayed rains, actually the rains didn't come. What we are getting here today is what God had budgeted for us to get in August. But it's not what we were to get in April, because we lost that opportunity. So much of our vegetation is actually patched, like the picture you showed us here. It's completely patched because it didn't rain. However, we know the reason for rainfall not falling is global warming. Every day we get a new breeze of fresh air from the Indian Ocean, and it covers our country. But this year has had the highest cloud cover in many years, but no rain. Every day you go out there's a possibility it can rain every day. But is it raining? No. So we need to address the global warming aspect, the climate, that warming that has made it impossible for clouds to actually condense and bring us rainfall needs to be addressed. And one way is to address our waste management process, because waste management generates methane gas. And methane gas has been accused of contributing a very big proportion, more than a third, of global warming. As we talk about industries that emit carbon dioxide, wastewater management system that emit methane gas are worse off, because unlike carbon dioxide, which can be used by other animals or plants to form the wood material, methane gas has no use to the environment. That's what we, as a scientist, that's where we need to focus on. Stop any system that generates methane gas, if it's wastewater management, if it is your agricultural process that would actually generate methane gas, avoid it, and that's where we came up with the technologies.
And I'd love to know whether these conversations are on at the level of EDOAS Beyond. We understand that we've had the Paris agreements and all this talks about the environment, and you know, we have stakeholders always coming together, but there is really nothing much that you know, we can bank on in terms of making sure that the climate is saved in future, and that we have, you know, access to clean water for that matter. We're talking about diseases, the difficulties for children and everybody, you know, in the environment because of lack of, you know, clean water or lack of access to clean water. As it was, in terms of what it is that you do, I'd love to understand that in as much as you'd pride in the fact that you are perhaps the second most greatest suppliers, reality is I would want to assume that you are not doing it to the right amounts or to the amounts that you're capable of doing this. What informs the same, and what are the conversations that are ongoing towards shifting this?
Okay, thank you very much. In fact, in the whole of Kenya, we have what we call non-revenue water. So apart from having little water in our dams, there is a lot of water that is lost. Maybe because of you know, pipelines which are old and they keep bursting, for example, or because of water theft in our Kenyan towns. So there's a lot of these, and as Eldoret, I think we came up with an inaugural climate action conference as part of implementation of the Paris Agreement, or what was discussed in COP26, because we realized that there was a missing link. You find that there's been a lot of discussion on, you know, Paris Agreement, you know, a lot of discussion on, you know, COP26, but the actualization mechanism whereby those country protocols or agreements are actually cascaded to the lower levels. This is what I think we need to do a lot. When we did our first inaugural climate action conference, we realized that there's a missing link that needs to be addressed, whereby all the agreements, for example, commitments for Kenya, needs to be cascaded to local level institutions, and counties and water service providers will be institutions that actually can easily be used in terms of ensuring that the country meets its commitment when it comes to targets on afforestation or reforestation to improve our forest cover. So the paradigm is actually shifting, and us as a water service provider, we are in the Ministry of Water, for example. There's need to be a lot of partnership between the Ministry of Water and the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in terms of signing MOUs with local level institutions, so that they will be able to implement some of the output out of the Paris Agreement. For example, look at what we are doing as Eldoret. Already we have partnered with institutions, airlines, like, for example, JumboJet. Because, you know, airlines have also a target to meet in terms of addressing their emissions, their carbon emission to the atmosphere. And one of the ways is to plant trees. So in our partnership with JumboJet, we're going to roll out what we call Adopt a Tree, so that passengers who use our airlines can contribute into a conservation kit, where we can ensure that we improve our forest cover. So the role of private sector, the role of government institutions and non-governmental institutions is something that I think as we move forward, the country needs to really pay a lot of attention there, because the financial resources that we have is not adequate. So unless we form those partnerships, then we'll not be able to meet our targets. Another thing maybe finally to speak about is the involvement of schools and school-going children in terms of conservation efforts and also youth. In Eldoret, we have a lot of youth foundations. There's a group called Trees for Peace. We've been able to speak to, for example, Moi Girls, the medical school, Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, where the youth there or the students who do not necessarily have financial resources contributed their hands in us meeting the 125,000 tree seedlings that we have planted today. So that has to shift. It is no longer going to be like the task of implementation of, let's say, the Paris Agreement of COP26 is the mandate of, let's say, the Ministry of Environment. It has to go out, and we have to call on all Kenyans to actually participate. And I think that will be a paradigm shift that we are looking at. And then also, we are no longer saying tree planting. It's tree growing. Tree growing. Trees are like children. So once you, like for example, as we have 2 tree nurseries in Eldoret, which has about 1.2 million tree seedlings. Okay. There's a lot of taking care of those tree seedlings. They are like babies. You have to water them. You have to, weed them. You have to take care of them until they grow. Once they grow, you transfer them now to plant. Once you plant, you have to follow and make sure that you have 100% success rate in terms of growing those trees.
Perhaps that's the catch-22 here. And you speak of that. I've been following up on Eldoret. I have witnessed and also reported on the inaugural Climate Action Conference. That was sometimes in April. In April, right? Yes. Yeah. And also the question of the tree planting exercises. And that was somewhere in Kaptagat.
Kaptagat. Right? We have done it in Kaptagat Forest. Right. We've done it in Keses. We've done it in Penon Forest. Right. And now we are heading to a place called Kabieko in the foothills of Cherangani Hills. So our catchment area begins from Keses all the way up to Cherangani Hills. So it's about 177,000 hectares of land. And you can see it's very massive. Right. I know the Minister of Environment has really done a lot there. The UK government is getting involved. Many development partners are getting involved. It is an issue which I think needs a lot of development partners, local and global, and not only for this area. It requires also a focus in all water catchment areas in Kenya. But for us, we are also appealing on western counties, in western counties in Nyanza, because a lot of the water which is being used in Nyanza and western comes from Cherangani Hills, through Nzoia River or through Kipkaren River. So it is in their interest to conserve, the catchment, and that's why we've been able to write to the Ministry of Environment if they can lead a conversation of uniting all western counties to contribute resources to actually conserve the catchment area, and including also Mau, South Rift. If they can, we can all partner and focus on water catchment areas in those areas.
Why I argue that this could be a catch-22 is because of where we begin. We begin at a space where we really do not have enough water. We begin at a space where we lack this commitment, like you rightfully put it. That most of the times when we're talking about tree planting is visitors who've come to visit and then they plant a tree and then they disappear. Perhaps they're going to come years later to see whether the tree grew at all or not. You have been with me on this set on constant occasions, telling me that right after this, we are embarking on a mission to, plant trees. We have seedlings from this corner. People have donated seedlings. But just how far do we go with this? And this is a long-term action, or this is something that is bound to give us results and, address the matter almost pronto? Thank you.
With that, when you consider that we are doing poor in terms of the tree cover in the country, I appreciate Eldoret for what they are doing, but they are already in an area where the tree cover is actually more than 30, also about 40%. And it's very good that he's talked about the other counties that downstream that also would actually influence the tree cover by doing something on their own, not just hoping that water will come down River Sosiani and all Yara, and they hope that it will just happen. What is lacking is our commitment as a country to actually ensure that the forest cover happens even where there was no forest cover in the last 20 years. Most of the northeastern is bare, completely bare of forest cover. But there's very little effort being directed in that area, where most of anything called northeastern, if it was covered with forest, the expansiveness of that area would actually have an impact on Eldoret, on Cherangani Hills and even the Mau Forest, because rain does not start just around that where the rain happens. From our, if you go down to Mombasa, there is no tree cover. We say that those areas that we can call Mutito and Day doesn't have any forest, and the name actually portrays that was a forested cover. So we need actually a more concerted effort. It is not, and it's not just the country, Kenya. I'm looking at a global initiative where everybody who has land to plant trees would do that. Because for sure, planting trees in a few counties in Kenya won't change the global warming. It is a calling for every human being living today to do something about tree planting and restore those areas where even from history we know there are tree cover, like the Sahara, our northeastern counties should, even if they didn't have in the last 200 years, we should plant trees there so that we can stem the global warming trend. And that is why when we come with technology that also supplement tree cover by reducing the methane gas from the environment, it should also actually be counted as an intervention. The country should actually project the use of biological material that would help reduce methane gas from our environment. Because in the last about 60 years, everybody has been trying to go away from the open defecation to very nice sanitary systems. But by so doing, we're actually creating points for methane gas production that end up in the environment and actually contributing to global warming. So it's something that requires more than just tree planting. It requires thorough, like you said, growing forest. Actually, we now start growing forest, not for commercial purpose, not so that we can come back and cut those trees, but just grow trees that will help absorb carbon dioxide from the environment, that would also help, we said, reach rainfall, and also that would also help in ecosystem restoration. We assume that the expanse of from Nairobi all the way to the coastline, that was supposed to be dry land without trees, but maybe God didn't create it like that. There were trees, but for maybe our practices in livestock keeping, we didn't want trees to grow because they reduce the amount of grass that can grow. So we burnt some of those forests to create pasture land. That now should change. We should reverse that. And I was actually talk about the Madenge tree as actually having been a big bonus to us. Although people accuse the plant of having displaced some communities because of its nature of spreading. But what would you be having in those areas if we didn't have Madenge tree? That forest cover along the Tana River in Garissa may not have been there if we didn't have the invasive species. So our idea of now restoring the environment is how to make sure that the Madenge tree becomes extracted as a fodder crop for people, but not eliminate. I know the Ministry of Environment had actually a budget for removing the weed from the environment, but it's highly advised against such a move, because when you have no other tree cover, when you remove the little that is there, you actually make the land more bare.
Well, with urbanization and with what it is that he speaks of and specific trees that we would perhaps, focus on, one that is tempted to say, do we focus much on the water catchment areas? or this trouble really goes beyond these catchment areas. Look at the population, look at urbanization, look at the spaces that we once had green, look at the spaces that were once vegetation. Today it's buildings and buildings and buildings. So how do we get ourselves off the hook? Do you suppose, even with the nations that have really gone, in terms of urbanization and overlooked the aspects of trees, this is where they get us as a country? Does it go beyond the water catchment areas?
Yes, definitely. It goes beyond the water catchment areas. In fact, in our strategy, we are also focusing on public institutions. We've been able to speak to so many schools. I know I've planted 1,000 trees in Mogals. I'm doing 1,000 in Chiapisas Boys. We have done 700 in a primary school called Kapchumba. We are focusing on our hospitals. We are also focusing on churches, where we've spoken to the Catholic Diocese of Eldoret. We are speaking to African Inland Church, even the Muslim community, the Indian community in Eldoret. And we are encouraging that everybody plants trees. In fact, we've gone far to include even our social clubs. If you go to sports club, we donated 5,000 tree seedlings and distributed to members there. We donated others to Eldoret Club. We are donating a lot of our tree seedlings to schools in our catchment area, families to plant trees in their houses. In fact, Eldoret is going to become the 5th city of Kenya. And one of the conditions for becoming a city is a green city. If you go to Kisumu, Kisumu is really a green city. You find trees all over the place. There are a lot of trees all over the place. And even ourselves, we've donated 11.4 acres within town, where we have our old sewage land, sewerage investment land. So what we have done there is that we have planted trees in the 11.4 acres within town, because we want to make Eldoret really a green city. Okay.
All right, we'll come back to the question of, setting up and growing of trees.
Yep.
And anti-logging, which one CS, Keriako Tobiko, says that we are on a mission to stop anti-logging.
Yeah.
But then we ask ourselves, have we managed to do that in a space where it's expensive to get kerosene, it's expensive to get electricity, and a majority of people will always resort to making use of firewood and all that? How do we stop these cases of anti-logging so that when we set up trees and we plant trees, we know that even those ones that are already in existence then are helpful towards this mission? After this short break.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
Well, do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands.
And Sanitation company, as well as the CEO, Ecosave Africa, that is Daniel Wanjoki, as we discuss a topic on the question of climate action and especially towards the aspect of water and how we get clean water, water supply, and we get ourselves to that aspect. And I say that, you know, for us to get matters climate right, water is at the heart of it. And we realize that the fact that we've had climatic changes, extreme climatic, you know, conditions, that is why then we also do not have this water. So you realize that this is a circle that really needs to be addressed. Let's talk anti-logging, which is pretty much common today, and cuts across. So we are planting. On the other end, there are people who are busy, you know, trying to get down these trees for whatever purposes that they use for. If it's about construction, if it's about, you know, using them as forms of getting energy and all that. I mean, how do we get to strike this balance? And I'm glad that we are focusing much on what is happening in the country. But can we as well do this in isolation, looking at the fact that this is a global problem?
I can take this. It is true that logging is a big problem in our attempt to get a 10% tree cover. However, as an environmentalist, I would wish to. However, as an environmentalist, I wish to actually encourage that we plant trees for the purpose of logging, but not in our forest. There is no space for our foresters to hold a permit to allow you to go cut down trees in the forest. It should never happen. But people outside the forest reserve areas should actually be allowed to grow vegetation, whatever form of vegetation, for firewood, for timber, for construction. And as much as possible, we should do this for afforestation in areas that we don't have tree cover at the moment. It would really help us if in the whole of Kajiado or Narok, we had tree stands only meant for firewood in areas where there's no tree cover at the moment. However, what we have noticed is that the few trees standing are being cut down for charcoal, and there's no plan for replacement. I would also encourage that areas where we have livestock keeping, there should be a mandatory biogas generation systems. Every household should have a small system for generating enough fuel through biogas that can be used for cooking. That would actually remove the pressure on cutting down of trees. The same should happen in schools, because schools are actually a big consumer, secondary school especially, or boarding schools, are big consumers of firewood, and they try to extract from the natural environment. But we would have, schools actually have areas where they can have wood lots, where they allow trees to be grown for their own consumption, even if it is not within the school compound. A school in one part of the county can sponsor a tree growing project in another part of the sub-county, and they make sure that they are able to access that firewood. I am saying this because firewood is actually a net zero carbon source of fuel. I wouldn't like to say that completely we don't use firewood, because it's not additional to the environmental carbon dioxide when you burn carbon or charcoal, unlike when you burn petroleum. So we should go less on LPG, use natural sources of energy like biogas without having to use LPG, and then grow trees when you have to use firewood. That would be a more sustainable way of ensuring that the future of the country is actually secured in terms of fuel. We've seen fuel going to 100, even petroleum or even kerosene going to 130, 120, 130. That means not many people can afford it. And there is the negative aspect that kerosene is actually fossil fuel. And whenever you burn it, you're actually adding to the global carbon budget. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just to add, to say that, first of all, on the question of partnerships, it's also important to partner with local communities.
Yes.
You realize that around Cherangani Hills, for example, there are local indigenous communities whose knowledge can really be of great importance in terms of protecting our water catchment areas. And sometimes we can drive local economic development by assisting the local communities to set up tree nurseries, and tree nurseries for indigenous trees, for example, because indigenous trees are not for commercial purposes. So that's what we can do. But on the question of logging, I think there's a bigger elephant in the room. The issues of governance. Issues of governance, which are largely encouraging deforestation. Like, for example, cultivation of forest land for economic purposes, and maybe not strengthening institutions around, issues of our forests. So there's need to be really a very robust governance structures, and then there is need to empower. And that's why I was saying, even for our budgets as we move forward, I think Kenya, we need to reduce now expenditure on infrastructure. We have done a lot of infrastructure since Kibaki up to now. I think it's time for us to refocus our budgets to agriculture and environmental protection, as well as water conservation. Because we can continue building roads, we can continue building dams, but there is a bigger challenge when it comes to the environment and water. If we are not going to change that trend and have more investments in the area of catchment conservation, our water towers, then in the not so long future, our towns will become ghost towns. Because when there is no clean water in urban areas, people will not live or will not exist in this kind of urban areas. So for me, I think we need to invest more in terms of refocusing our budgets, and then we ensure good governance, good enforcement mechanism, because you realize that in our forest areas, there are people who carry out illegal logging. And I think the fourth estate will play also a critical role here,
right,
where the media can do investigative stories, so that you can be able to unmask who are these people who are really involved in logging in Kenya. And you will realize that the people who are, you might realize, I'm not certain about that, but of course I've heard about it. You might realize that the people propagating or encouraging this logging are actually people who are supposed to be enforcing and ensuring that there is no logging in our forests, just for economic purposes. So there is need for us to implement our policies, to implement our laws, and I think we should be able, if we do this, we should be able to increase our forest cover in our country. We'll make our towns sustainable. We'll make access to water and sanitation available to all Kenyans. Remember, in our Katiba, Article 43, water and sanitation is a basic human right. And even in our country's commitments under the Vision 2030, our commitments under the Sustainable Development Goals, number 6, it talks about universal coverage in terms of water and sanitation, and also prioritizing the needs of women and girls. So I think as a country we need to be serious on these matters and ensure that we run the talk. For us, we're no longer talking about walking the talk. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot on the deck that we need to do. And we have no time to waste. We just need to roll out programs and implement them if we have to guarantee a higher quality of life for Kenyans in the near future.
Wow. All right. This water that we see here, as we come to a close, just how much have we embraced the aspect of recycling today? How much technology have we incorporated in the country that would help us, get into that space of recycling? Does it require, technology that is so rocket science, or something that we can literally do in the country, as the current remedy, as we speak of, the things that need to be done?
So Kenya has a unique position in the world, in that all technologies that have been tested locally, we have been able to treat wastewater and give it a quality that is acceptable to the environment. This is what is set up as the parameters for discharge to the environment, which is a BOD below 30, that is biological oxygen demand below 30, and COD below 50. And in many countries, they are not able to meet that because of the technology that are available. We here in Kenya managed to crack that, and through our recycling projects, and the product we came up with called EcoTreat with digester, we're actually able to bring this water. This is actually water from a mall, and this can actually be used now for tree planting.
Okay.
It can be used for factories that don't require very clean water, like cooling systems. It can be used for construction, and the same water can also be used for sanitation, because it is very bad for us to have potable water that goes to the kitchen. We use that for drinking, and then the same pipe is taking the water to the toilet for you to flush down.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you took the budget for flushing toilets in Eldoret away from his budget, you'd actually meet the demand for fresh water, potable water.
Okay.
So it requires rethink a sense of waste management and also the construction industry. Because you go to a high-rise flat with 10 floors, and they have one single tank at the top that supplies the kitchen, supplies the toilets. Even if you had borehole water in the compound, where you would be able to treat the borehole water and make it potable, the balance, the remainder of that water, which is salt water, more salt water than the one that you are drinking, is actually not able to be used in the house, because you have only one tank at the top. So we are working with the NCA and also NITA to try to change our plumbing rule books and make it possible for people to recycle wastewater. We also recommending that every school should have a wastewater recycling system. It's also a learning point for kids, and also at the same time also ensure that they have biogas generation using the human waste.
Right.
This would actually help us in bridging the gap that is talked about, 20 million liters in Eldoret, that actually would actually be recovered from recycled wastewater.
Amazing.
Yeah. Then we came up with a product called EcoTreat.
As we sum it up, yes?
Yeah. EcoTreat with digester is actually recognized internationally, and the Ministry of Water actually in 2019 awarded us the first position for outstanding innovation in the international category on the aspect of wastewater recycling. We are selling this to other countries, the Americas, Europe, from here in this country, and so it should actually be made mandatory, even for my colleague, Mr. Biwott, to use such a technology in actually filling the gap of by recycling wastewater and actually availing it. Even for forestry, they require water to grow trees.
All right.
And this is even more of concern in our northern counties where there is not.
Oh, it's extremely bad down there, and we risk starvation and all this. This is simply because we do not get it right in terms of making sure that there's provision of water for everybody in the country. As we close it, your parting shots.
For us, I think as Kenyans, we need to pay attention to also conserving our water. What we need to know is that the country is water deficient, despite the fact that we are in the tropics. In the tropics, it means we are along the equator, and this is an area where we should be experiencing a lot of rainfall. As we speak today, as it rains, for example, in our hometown in Eldoret and our region, there's a lot of water that flows into rivers. And by September, towards October, up to March, there's going to be a lot of water scarcity in the area. We are proposing that in the near future, just like what has been done in the Upper Tana and Nairobi Water Fund, we are going to assist our community to build water pans, which can store water for dry seasons. We are also asking and calling on those who are responsible in our counties and in our country to ensure that building plants have also a requirement of water storage, so that when it rains, all the rainwater can be stored and used during the dry seasons.
Yes.
So we just have to work smart. Otherwise, the issue of water scarcity and water challenges will continue. We want to urge on our consumers to be able to take care of the water. We always say, Linda Maji Mtani in Eldoret, don't wash your clothes from the tap.
Yeah.
make sure you, as much as possible, take care of the little water that you have. Sure. It will reduce complaints, it will guarantee you good health and sustainable access in terms of meeting our requirements in water and sanitation in our country.
Amazing. And I agree with you, gentlemen, that it begins with us. And on that very note, I hope that we pick something that is very, very important as we all look forward to a scenario where we will do all our best in terms of action plan to make sure that there is access to clean water for everybody. Managing Director, Eldoret Water and Sanitation Company, that is Peter Biwott, as well as the CEO for Ecosave Africa, Daniel Wanjoki. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the great insights. We do not tire. We keep doing this. Daniel will tell you that we do this oftenly. It might appear boring to very many people.